This body cam video in the Breonna Taylor investigation was released to the public as part of an effort at transparency. It shows the scene at Breonna Taylor's home after she was fatally shot by Louisville police officers in March of this year. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who shot an officer he says he mistook for an intruder, is seen in the video telling officers that his girlfriend Breonna is the only one still inside. Members of the SWAT team enter the apartment, clearing the scene room by room.
Hey, she's down at the end of the hall.
Breonna Taylor is laying dead on the floor.
Go ahead and get EMS in here.
Hey, Tim, come inside. Medic inside. Clear.
Give me help roll her over. Joe. There you go, buddy.
I'm gonna check her pulse.
Ma'am, can you hear us? Louisville Metro Police Department. Check that wrist, dude. Check the wrist.
This video is one of dozens released by Louisville police from an internal investigation into what happened that night. Also released several interviews with members of law enforcement, including this one with Lieutenant Dale Massey, a member of the SWAT team who called what happened to Breonna Taylor an egregious act.
We just got the feeling that night that, something like that happened. As we debriefed and looked over, it was just an egregious act.
The warrant issued to search Breonna Taylor's apartment was part of a drug investigation targeting her ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover. In the newly released evidence files, there are surveillance photos showing Taylor with Glover in February, a month before her death. The photos, according to investigative reports, show Taylor and Glover in a vehicle together. She gets out at one point and gets back in while he goes into a house. The photos seem to contradict the story Glover told police that he hadn't seen Breonna in the months before she was killed. Glover also talked about his contact with Taylor in a recorded jailhouse phone call the night of the raid.
We ain't been around each other in over 2 months, damn near 2 months.
Say my name!
The decision by a grand jury to charge only one of the 3 officers involved in the incident has led to angry protests in Louisville and across the country. Now, with more evidence in the hands of the public, Louisville leaders are hoping transparency will bring calm to the city.
All right, let's bring in the best team of legal journalists in the business with us. Anchor Ted Rowland, special contributor Ashley Banfield, and anchor Michael Ayala. Great to have you all aboard. Ted, going through this, give us an idea, first of all, of how much material was released, and what's the one big takeaway from all of it?
It was a document dump. There are tons of videos, dozens of them, interviews, body cam video, phone conversations that have been recorded, all of the evidence that has been compiled in this investigation. And the biggest takeaway is just why. You look at all of this and there's this feeling of dread when you see that body cam video of them clearing this house and she's laying there dead. It just brings it home. It brings it home that they just never should have done it this way. Whether anything illegal was done is another question, but this was a bad decision to serve this warrant with just these 3 guys when the rest of the SWAT team was at another house serving a different warrant.
Ashley Banfield, do you think anything that is released, because what you see here is, an attempt at transparency and trying to put everything out, trying to regain some level of public trust with a large portion of the community that's been questioning everything that happened here. Do you think that can ever happen?
I think we're really in sort of uncharted waters on that, I'll be honest with you. But I do think that there is a grave concern in that community about a jury pool, because there is one officer who's charged adjacent to the death of Breonna Taylor, not for it, but for firing into the apartment next door. And there is still a lot of community sentiment that the Daniel Cameron, the AG, got it wrong. And there's a lot of pop culture that is propagating that as well. And so there's unrest and dissatisfaction. Whether it's warranted or not, that's what's going to have to be meted out with the release of this information. It's so hard to say, though. But I will say that in Ferguson, Missouri, when ultimately the federal government did its investigation and released its findings into the death of Michael Brown, and really exonerated again Officer Wilson. He didn't need exoneration; he was never charged in the first place. He got a no bail, but things were more calm. Whether they're resolved, I highly doubt it. I don't know that we're ever going to get to resolution. There's just way too much going on in this country that has nothing to do with the police and has everything to do with us and how we treat each other and the assumptions that we all make about each other. Will this help in that? Maybe, but probably not.
Michael, do you think everyone's kind of dug in, like they've got their impression, they've got their take on what happened here, whichever side you're on, and nothing that you see or hear is going to change anyone's mind?
I don't know. I just want to say that, yes, they did exonerate the officer in the Michael Brown case, but that investigation, if you remember, revealed just how much wrongdoing the police were involved in. It showed how they were treating citizens. Essentially, they had a debtor's jail. They were, all the practices that needed to be cleaned up. I think a lot is happening now as well. You have a lot of cleaning up to do in these police departments. You got 12 million reasons to know that a lot went wrong in this investigation and the way they handled this entire case. And these are the things that need to be cleaned up. Now, whether people are entrenched in a position that, perhaps everything went right or everything went wrong, you cannot deny the fact that things need to be cleaned up. They're showing themselves. And I think it has to do with that light you're talking about. The light is being shown on what's going on behind the scenes, the things that previously had been hidden from people. Now that they're showing themselves, they're seeing a lot needs to be fixed up, and internally as well as from pressure externally.
Ted, one of the things that we have seen, and we've been talking about this, are the grand jury testimony, the recordings that were released, and that just doesn't happen. Now, the Attorney General now has filed his own motion relative to what else is going on, because it seems grand jurors want to come forward. They want to be able to speak. They want transcripts released. There's a lot more going on. What does the Attorney General want to happen here?
Well, it's a back and forth, right? So there's grand jurors that say, hey, we agreed we wouldn't say anything. It's a secret process, but we'd like to change that. So they filed a motion. Well, today the AG filed a reply, and basically he's arguing, no, this is not proper, and we're not going to just give into this one. And he made a few points. 4 of them is basically saying the plaintiff failed to properly initiate the request for a judgment, and that the plaintiff lacks standing. Also, that the plaintiff didn't articulate why this is a proper way to go, why this should not be secret, because that's the way it has always been done. And finally, he said the plaintiff seeks a declaration that is inconsistent with Kentucky rules that require the proceedings and the testimony before a grand jury to remain secret. The bottom line here is, Vinny, the AG and the police department today or yesterday, with all of this document dumping, they've been agreeing to almost everything, and this is where they're saying no.
All right, so now the question I have for both of you, Ashley and Michael, what about the grand jury proceedings? Is there a reason why it needs to remain secret? I know they've got a rule in Kentucky, but you could change the rules. The rules are different in different states. What do you think, Ashley?
Well, I also think it's important for people to remember why grand juries are secret, because when you say the word secret on television, it sounds like something's wrong or something's bad, or you're trying to cover something up. But grand juries are actually protected by the secrecy. It's just like, I guess the same analogy I would make is when you talk to your lawyer, it's privileged. You can speak freely to your lawyer. You need to be safe in your conversations with your lawyer and your priest. I think it's the same principle for grand jurors to be able to know that they can operate in safety. And you trace a lot of this notion back to the mob and trying to prosecute members of the mob. Jurors were terrified and they were threatened. They have to be safe in knowing that they can operate in an environment where they won't be prosecuted or persecuted. So there's that element that I think some people forget in the sweeping anger over secret grand jury proceedings in cases where it doesn't go, according to the, your version of the justice.
All right, Mike, I'll give you the final word on this. Should we be shining a light on the grand jury, and should they be able to be free to speak afterwards?
You know, I think the presumption should be that it's an open process. Certainly there are cases that are going to require secrecy, and I think those should be on a case-by-case basis rather than the other way around. And I go to a conversation I had today in a production meeting where one of our producers, I was trying to explain the whole grand jury process, why it's secret, and they couldn't quite understand it. They didn't like it. And that's the response of most lay people. They don't like it. People want to know what's going on, especially in these cases that involves death of people or in people's liberty being taken away. They want to know what's going on. And I agree with you. You hammer the drum every night, I think, Vinny, about openness, transparency. I think that's the best way to go as we try to move forward as a country.
You know who really wants those grand jury things wide open? The criminal defense bar. They want to go into the grand jury. All right. Thanks so much, Ted, Ashley, Michael. We'll be speaking again throughout the 3 hours here.